The fuel gauge was in the red. Lieutenant Commander McClusky had been flying for over 2 hours. Below him, nothing but open Pacific Ocean in every direction. No ships, no fleet, no targets. Where the Japanese carriers were supposed to be, there was only water, grey, empty, indifferent to the fact that the entire course of the war might depend on what happened in the next 5 minutes. His radio was silent, his orders were useless, his fuel was almost gone. He had 2 choices: turn back, land safely, report that he found nothing, or turn northwest, on instinct, on a calculation nobody had authorized, on the kind of decision that has no manual and no safety net, and take one last look. He turned northwest. What he found 4 minutes later would destroy 3 aircraft carriers, break the spine of the Japanese Pacific Fleet, and change the course of the Second World War before lunchtime. But McClusky did not know any of that yet. He only knew the fuel gauge and the empty ocean and the turn. The Battle of Midway is remembered as America's greatest naval victory of the Second World War, the turning point of the Pacific, the moment the tide reversed and never turned back. What the textbooks rarely say is how close it came to never happening at all. Japan did not lose at Midway because America was stronger. In June of 1942, America was not stronger. Japan did not lose because of superior tactics or overwhelming firepower or the grinding industrial logic that would eventually decide the war. Japan lost because of 4 minutes. 4 minutes in which everything that could go wrong for one side went wrong simultaneously, and one man, alone, out of fuel, out of contact, and completely lost, made the right turn. This is the story of those 4 minutes and the man who found them by accident. To understand what Midway meant, you must first understand what the Pacific felt like in this spring of 1942. Pearl Harbor was 6 months in the past. The smell of burning oil still lived in the memory of every American sailor in the Pacific. The particular nauseating signature of warships dying in shallow water on a Sunday morning while the men inside them had no time to understand what was happening. In 6 months, Japan had taken the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, Burma, the Dutch East Indies, and was pressing towards Australia. The Pacific was, in the most literal operational sense, a Japanese ocean. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto understood something that made him dangerous beyond the immediate military situation. He understood that time was working against Japan. America's industrial capacity, once fully mobilized, once the staggering productive machinery of the United States economy was fully committed to the war, would generate ships and aircraft and men at a rate that Japan could not mathematically match. The window in which Japan could win a decisive victory was closing. It had to be used. Yamamoto's plan was elegant in its ambition. Take Midway Atoll, a pair of islands sitting almost exactly halfway between the American mainland and Japan, home to a new American naval base. Force the Americans to defend it, destroy what remained of the US Pacific Fleet in the engagement, and establish a defensive perimeter so complete that America would have no choice but to negotiate a peace that left Japan in control of the Pacific. It was a good plan. It had one catastrophic flaw. Commander Joseph Rochefort, working in a windowless basement at Pearl Harbor with a team of crypto-analysts who'd been breaking Japanese naval codes for months, read the plan before the Japanese executed it. He knew the target, he knew the date, he knew the force composition. He handed Admiral Chester Nimitz the most valuable intelligence asset of the Pacific War, the knowledge of exactly what was coming and exactly when. Nimitz set the trap. 3 American carriers, Yorktown, Enterprise, Hornet, positioned northeast of Midway, hidden beyond the range of Japanese reconnaissance, waiting, while Yamamoto's fleet, 4 first-line carriers at its core, sailed towards an ambush it did not know existed. The Japanese carried absolute confidence into those waters. They had every reason to. Their 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaiga, Soryu, Hiryu, represented the finest naval aviation force on Earth. Their pilots were veterans, their aircraft was superior, their plan was sound. What they did not carry was the knowledge that someone had read their mail.
On the morning of June 4th, 1942, Vice Admiral Choichi Nagumo launched his strike against Midway. 108 aircraft rose from the Japanese carriers in the grey pre-dawn and flew toward the island. What followed was organised chaos on both sides. American aircraft launched from Midway attacked the Japanese fleet in successive, uncoordinated waves and were destroyed. Torpedo bombers without fighter escort flew straight into the guns of the Japanese Combat Air Patrol and were annihilated. Of the first wave of American attackers, almost none returned. The Japanese fighters, drawn down to low altitude by the torpedo attacks, circled the fleet in tight defensive patterns while the carriers below them prepared for the next phase. On the Japanese carriers, the decks were a controlled hurricane of activity. Aircraft being rearmed, fuel lines snaking across flight decks slick with aviation gasoline, bombs being swapped for torpedoes, then torpedoes being swapped back for bombs as Nagumo changed his mind twice in 30 minutes, receiving conflicting reports, making decisions and reversing them, trying to manage a battle that was moving faster than his information. The aircraft were stacked on the flight decks, fueled and armed, waiting for the order to launch. The Japanese Combat Air Patrol was low, the carriers were full of fuel and armed aircraft, the decks were crowded, and somewhere above the clouds, McClusky was turning northwest.
4 minutes. That is how long it took. McClusky's dauntless dive bombers came out of the sun at 10:22 in the morning, pushing over into their attack dives from altitude. The Pacific tilted in their windscreens as the Japanese carriers resolved from abstract shapes into specific targets, with men on their decks who had not yet looked up. Simultaneously, in a coordination that was not coordinated, that happened by chance, that required 2 separate American squadrons to arrive over the same target at the same moment by independent routes, Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie's group from the Yorktown arrived over the Soryu. The Japanese Combat Air Patrol was at low altitude, out of position, unable to climb fast enough to intercept dive bombers already in their attack dives. The Kaga took 4 bomb hits in the space of seconds. One struck a gasoline truck near the bridge. The explosion killed the entire command staff. The armed and fueled aircraft on her deck became a secondary catastrophe, a chain reaction of detonating ordnance and burning aviation fuel that consumed the ship from the inside out. She was finished before her crew understood what had happened. The Soryu took 3 hits. Her munitions detonated. The ship was engulfed. The Akagi, Admiral Nagumo's flagship, the ship that had launched the attack on Pearl Harbor, the centerpiece of the Japanese carrier force, took a single bomb. It hit the edge of the flight deck and detonated among the armed aircraft waiting to launch. 1 bomb, 1 ship. The chain reaction that followed was not survivable. 3 carriers, 4 minutes. Nagumo was pulled from the burning Akagi by his staff and transferred to a light cruiser. He sent Yamamoto the message that the Japanese fleet had no framework for receiving. 3 of his 4 carriers were gone. Not damaged, not retreating, gone, burning on the surface of the Pacific, sending columns of black smoke into the clear June sky that could be seen for miles in every direction. The battle was not over. The Hiryu, the 4th Japanese carrier, far ahead of the others, launched her aircraft and found the Yorktown, hitting her 3 times and leaving her listing and burning. The Americans struck back. 40 dive bombers found the Hiryu and left her dying in the water. By the afternoon of June 4th, 1942, all 4 Japanese carriers were gone. The battle continued for 2 more days in diminishing exchanges that both sides knew were epilogue. The result had been decided in 4 minutes over the deck of the Kaga. Everything after was consequence.
The numbers from Midway are clean enough to be recited without losing their meaning. Japan lost 4 first-line aircraft carriers, 292 aircraft, 2,500 men, including an irreplaceable concentration of veteran naval aviators whose skill and experience could not be rebuilt on any timeline that mattered. The offensive capacity of the Japanese Pacific Fleet, the ability to project power, to threaten, to strike first and strike decisively, died on the surface of the Pacific on June 4, 1942. Japan would never recover it. America lost the Yorktown, 1 destroyer, 145 aircraft, 307 men. The exchange was not a battle, it was a transformation. The Pacific that existed on the morning of June 4th, Japanese, expanding, moving toward Australia and beyond with a momentum that felt, from the receiving end, like geological process, did not exist on the evening of June 4th. What existed instead was the beginning of the long, brutal, island-by-island reversal that would end 3 years later in Tokyo Bay. But here's the thing about Midway that the clean numbers and the strategic assessments and the historical summaries tend to obscure. It began with a man who was lost. McClusky had no targets, had no contact with his superiors, had fuel enough for minutes of flying, not hours, had every rational reason to turn back and every instinctive reason to turn northwest, had no guarantee, had only the pilot's knowledge of how a fleet moves and the particular stubbornness of a man who had been sent to find something and had not yet found it. He found it. And the battle that followed, the 4 minutes that destroyed 3 carriers, the chain reaction of burning fuel and detonating ordnance that consumed the finest naval aviation force in the Pacific, all of it traces back to a single decision made by a single man in a cockpit with the fuel gauge in the red and the ocean empty below him and no voice on the radio telling him what to do. This is the paradox of Midway, the battle that saved millions, that turned the Pacific, that ended the Japanese offensive, that set in motion the sequence of events that would conclude with the formal surrender of Japan on the deck of the USS Missouri, began with one man completely, utterly, and entirely lost. The great turning points of history do not announce themselves. They do not arrive with the weight and the ceremony that their eventual significance demands. They arrive in cockpits, on quiet roads, in basement rooms with broken codes and windowless walls. They arrive in the moment before the decision, when the outcome is unknown and the fuel is low and the ocean below is empty. And the only thing available is the choice between turning back and turning northwest. McClusky turned northwest. The rest is the Pacific War, and the Pacific War is the rest of everything.
One man turned northwest and changed the world. There are more stories like this. Stories the textbooks summarize in 2 sentences, and history deserves to tell in full. Subscribe, and we will tell them.